Hi, in this part of the tutorial we'll start modeling our character. Before we can do that though, first let's import our reference images. I have supplied these so you can get them from the course resources. We'll import our front reference first. Press Shift A and select Image Reference. Find your front reference image, unclick Align to View and then load the reference image. Now you want to rotate it. Press R to rotate and then X to constrain the rotation only to the X-axis. After that, type in 90 on your keyboard. That rotates the image 90 degrees in the X-axis. Now let's add a side reference the same way. Press Shift A and select Image Reference. Find your reference image and with Align to View still unchecked, load the reference image. Press R and then X to constrain the rotation only to the X-axis. After that, type in 90. Then press R to rotate again and then Z to constrain the rotation only to the Z-axis. Then type in 90 again. Now we have both our references imported. Let's position them. Select the side reference and press G and X to move it over to the left side. Move the front reference back with G and Y so it's not in the way. Now we want to reduce the opacity of the images and position them so we can see them while we're modeling. Select one of the references and go down here in Object Data Properties. Enable opacity and reduce it to something like 0.08. After that, set the image depth to front. This allows us to see the image in front of the mesh, which will make matching the proportions while modeling much easier. Let's do the same for the side reference. Select the image and go into Object Data Properties. Enable the opacity and reduce it to 0.08. Then, in depth, press on front so we can see the image in front of the model. Press numpad 3 for side view. Here we want to flip the side image so it's facing the other way. Press S, Y, and then type in -1. This flips the image on the Y-axis. Next we just want to grab both references as well as the cube and move them up a bit. Press Shift and click on the three objects to select them all. Then move them up with G and Z. You want the feet of the character to be at this red line. Nice, now everything is set up and facing the correct way. Let's start modeling. To model our character, we're going to be using a technique called box modeling. Box modeling is when you use a simple shape, in this case this cube here, to block out the overall shape of your model. Once you have the overall shape down, you go in and reshape the model to get it looking closer to your desired object. Reshaping involves changing the location, rotation, and scale of the vertices, edges, and faces. The box modeling technique is great for beginners. This is because when you're modeling, it's very important to have the base shape down first before you jump into details. Box modeling really helps with that. So how we'll be working today is we're going to start very simple and then we're going to work our way to the details only after we're happy with the base. Now let's start blocking out our model. Press numpad 1 to go into front view. Select the cube. Position it where the head is with G and scale it down with S. Here you want to make sure your reference is centered. I notice that mine is a bit off center, so I'm just moving it with G and X so the center aligns with the blue line. Now we're going to start extruding this cube to block out the rest of the body. Press Tab and go into Edit mode. Press 3 for face selection and select this face on the bottom of the cube. Press E to extrude the face. Then press S to scale down the newly extruded face. You want to scale this face in and you want it to be the size of the neck on the reference. After that, press numpad 1 for front view. Press E again and extrude the selected face down like this. Click to accept the extrusion. This will be the neck. Now let's extrude the shoulders and the torso. With the face on the bottom of the neck still selected, press E to extrude again. Press S to scale up the newly extruded face. Move it down a bit with G and Z. Now let's extrude the torso. Press E to extrude again and move the new face all the way down to the hips. Click to accept the extrusion. Press S to scale up this face and match the size to the hips on the reference. Now what we're going to do is we're going to delete half of this model and mirror it over. That way we can only work on one half of the model at a time, and then the result will get mirrored over to the other side. This way we can save a lot of time while modeling. To delete one half of the mesh, we first need to add a loop down the middle here to separate the two halves. To do that, while in edit mode still, press Ctrl R. Click to add a loop down the middle here. Now we can delete one half of the mesh. Click on this little icon here to turn on X-ray mode. X-ray mode allows you to select the faces on the front of the mesh as well as the ones at the back. Now drag your mouse and select the left half of the mesh. With all the faces selected, press X and choose Faces to delete the selected faces. Now we want to mirror over the remaining half of the model. To do that, go here into Modifier Properties, and from the Add Modifier menu, add the Mirror modifier. This mirrors the mesh over to the other side. Here, make sure that clipping is turned on so your mesh is merged down the middle. Now when we work on one side of the mesh, the results will get mirrored over to the other side as well. Next, let's extrude the legs. Rotate to the bottom of the mesh here and select this bottom face. Press I to insert the face. After that, press S and Y to scale the face in the Y-axis. You want this face to be square. Now press G and Z and move the new face down. Scale it up to match the proportions of the leg on the reference. After that, I'm just scaling in the Y-axis again to make sure that face is square still. Once you're happy with the shape of the face, while it's still selected, press E to extrude it. Extrude it all the way down to the bottom here. Click to accept the extrusion. Now let's do the foot. Press Ctrl R and add a loop on the bottom of the leg like this. After that, press Free for face selection. Select this front face on the bottom here. Then press E and Y to extrude it. Click to accept the extrusion. After that, press 1 for vertice selection and select these front vertices. Press G and Z to move them down. Next, let's extrude the arms. Press numpad 1 for front view. Then press Ctrl R and add a loop around the shoulder area here. Now press Free for face selection. Select this face on the side of the torso. Press I to insert the face. Inserting it like this gives us good flow of the loops around the shoulder, so once we rig and animate the mesh, that will allow us to have good deformations in the shoulder area when the model is bending. With the new inserted face selected, press S and Y to scale the face in the Y-axis. You want this face to be square as well. Press G and X to move the face out a bit. After that, press S, X and 0 to flatten the face in the X-axis. After that, press E and extrude the face all the way to the end of the arm. Click to accept the extrusion. Nice work! Now we're done with extruding all the parts. Next, we're going to shape the box model we just created to match the proportions on the reference better. We're going to push and pull the existing vertices, edges and faces around to match the proportions as closely as we can. Only once we're happy with the shape can we smooth our mesh. Okay, let's start reshaping our mesh. First, let's turn on X-ray from up here. While still in edit mode, press 1 for vertice selection. Select these vertices at the bottom of the foot and press S to scale them down a bit. That will make the foot shape nice and tapered like in the reference. Select these vertices on the foot as well and bring them down with G and Z. After that, grab this vertex on the hips here and bring it in with G and X. Next, let's add some loops around the areas where the mesh will be bending. Once we smooth, Blender will then add more resolution around the areas where we're currently adding loops. So you'll just have more edges and faces to work with around those areas. Press Ctrl R and add some loops. Add one to where the knee will bend. Add one here at the elbow, and finally add one around the wrist. Here, scale the loop around the wrist a bit with S to make the wrist thinner. Okay, nice, that's good for now. Remember, we're just blocking everything out, so there's no need for details here. Next, let's fix the silhouette from the side. Press numpad 3 for side view. Select the vertex at the front and then shift select the vertices at the back of the hips. Press S and Y to bring those in. Select these vertices as well and press S and Y to bring those out a bit. We're just trying to match the proportions here as close as we can with the little topology that we have. It doesn't have to be perfect, so don't worry. Select this vertex on the front of the chest here and then shift select this one at the back. Press S and Y to scale those in. Do the same on the bottom. Right now we're modeling the body that is underneath the clothes, so we don't have to match the shape of the sweater. We'll do the sweater separately. So we're just trying to get a good torso shape for underneath. After you're done, press Tab and go into Object Mode. Turn off X-ray mode from up here and hide the reference planes from here. Now you can more clearly see the model we did. It's very basic, but it matches the proportions on the reference. So now we're ready to smooth our model for the first time. First, let's smooth the normals and then we'll add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth the actual mesh. To smooth the normals, right-click and choose Shade Smooth. That makes the normals of the existing faces smooth, so all the individual faces don't look sharp anymore. Now let's add a modifier to smooth our mesh. Go into Modifier Properties here and add a Subdivision Surface modifier. As you can see, now the mesh looks much smoother. Like I mentioned in the first part of this tutorial, this modifier is currently only a preview in the viewport, so it hasn't actually been applied to the mesh yet. If you press Tab and go into Edit mode, you can see that we still have the original model here. So the smoothing is just a preview until we actually apply the modifier. This is actually really handy as you can make additional changes and preview how these changes will look on the mesh before you've applied the modifier. If we go back into Object Mode, go here and click Apply, you can see that now the modifier has actually been applied. So now you have more faces to work with and the mesh is smooth. However, before we apply this modifier, we want to make some adjustments and harden some areas. So just undo that. To undo, you can press Ctrl Z. Now again we have the modifier added, but it hasn't been applied. Now let's harden some areas before we apply it. How we do that is by adding extra edge loops to the areas we want to be sharper. Let me show you what I mean. Press Tab and go into Edit mode. Go to the neck area. Here we don't want the transition from the head to the neck to be so smooth, and instead we want it to be sharper. How we make that sharper is by adding a loop close to the base of the neck. To add a loop, press Ctrl R. Put it up here and click to insert it. Now you can see that the transition is much sharper. Let's do this for a couple more areas where we want to have a harder transition. For example, at the bottom of the neck here. Press Ctrl R and add another loop close to the base. Then press Ctrl R again and add a loop to the hand here. Press Ctrl R again and add one near the shoulder. And finally press Ctrl R one last time and add a loop around the foot like this. Now that makes all those areas nice and sharp. Next, let's adjust the shape of the mesh a bit more before we apply the modifier. Press 1 for vertice selection. Select these toe vertices and scale them in with S and X. Adjust the shape of the head as well to match the front and side reference better. The beauty of the Blender modifiers is that you can preview them in the viewport before applying them. This allows you to make adjustments like these before committing. This saves a lot of time tweaking later down the line. Let me just turn off X-ray and the references so you can see what we've done. That looks really nice now. Let's apply the modifier. Press Tab and go into Object Mode. Next to the modifier, from this little tick mark, choose Apply. Now your mesh is smoothed. When you go into Edit Mode, you can see that we now have more polygons to work with. What we're going to do now is we're going to make the foundations for our face topology, and we'll adjust the silhouette of the character further. First, let me explain what topology is. Topology is the flow and organization of vertices, edges, and faces on a model. Good topology flow is very important when it comes to animated characters. This is because when the character moves, the model is going to be deformed. Good topology ensures that deformations look realistic, otherwise the mesh will pinch, stretch, or just deform incorrectly when animated. Truth be told, there isn't one correct way to do topology. Different artists do things slightly differently. There isn't an exact spot you should place each loop. However, no matter what your topology flow is, you're aiming for good deformations. General rules you want to remember is to not place triangles in areas that will be deforming a lot, and to not place poles in areas that will be deforming a lot as well. So you want to avoid placing these in the corners of the mouth, really close to the eyes, at the elbows or the knees, and other areas that will be bending. In terms of face topology, an easy way to get good deformations is to make your topology or edge flow follow the structure of the muscles in the face. This way, when the face moves and the muscles contract, the deformation a base for good facial topology on our model. Let's start. Press Tab and go into Edit Mode. Then press Free for face selection. Shift select these two faces. After that, press E to extrude them and S to scale down the extrusion. We do this so we can have a nice rounded continuous loop around the eyes. This will later be very helpful when you rig and animate your character. Let's do the same for the mouth area. Select this face, then press E to extrude the face. Click to accept the extrusion, then press S to scale it in. Now we have a nice rounded continuous loop around the mouth as well. Move the newly extruded faces out a bit with G and Y. You're just trying to make the curvature of the face nice. You don't want these new faces to be too Now we're going to shape the body to match the reference even better. Now that we have more polygons to work with, making more complex shapes will be possible. Let's start with the hip area. Press Tab and go into Edit Mode. Press 1 for vertice selection. Select these vertices around the leg and position them to match the reference closer by pressing G and Z. X-axis with G and X. This here will be the palm of the hand. We'll extrude the fingers from that later on. After this, press Tab and go into Object mode. From the Modifiers tab, add a Subdivision Surface modifier. Don't apply the modifier yet, we're just adding it for now. Now here you can see that the legs are an odd shape. Let's fix those now. Press Tab and go into Edit mode. The reason it looks odd is because the legs on my model are a bit too wide on the y-axis. To fix that, press 2 to go into Edge Selection. Double click on the edges and then scale them in by pressing S and Y. Here remove this edge loop by double clicking it, then right clicking and choosing Dissolve Edge. This was an edge we didn't really need as it was too close to this edge here. Next I continue to adjust the leg shape. After I'm happy with the legs, I press 1 for vertice selection. I choose the vertices at the front and the back of the pelvis and I move them apart with S and Y. The area has a nicer shape. Next, let's adjust the shape of the head. With X-ray turned on, grab the individual vertices and position them to match the reference with G. Out-of-box modeling is just grabbing and tweaking individual vertices. Personally, I find that super fun and therapeutic even. Once you get used to modeling, it's almost like meditation trying to match your model to your reference by tweaking everything. Now everything matches the reference pretty good. We're now ready to apply the Subdivision Surface modifier. Press Tab and go into Object mode. Next to the modifier, click on the check mark and choose Apply. Now our mesh is smoothed further. This is the